Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first CUGC Ask Me Anything of 2021. I'm very excited to get into all your questions today and see what all pops up in the conversation because it's always interesting when it's unscripted. But before we dive in, I'm just going to remind you that we do have some meetings coming up. Our local groups are still meeting, and definitely check out our events calendar to see what's coming up near you. And then next week we have a webinar with Nutanix. So if you don't get enough from Jarian today, you can catch him again next week. So be sure to check that out. All right. So yeah, like I said, we're here to ask anything. So that means you can ask any questions you have about Login VSI and Nutanix, how it all works, what they can do for you. Ask away. All right, we are recording today, so you will get a link to today's recording. It's going to come to you directly from GoToWebinar, and that should come out tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. Also, like we said, put your questions in the chat anytime, rapid fire. And we have a short survey at the end that I'll send out. Hope you can fill it out. It's just for CUGC use only, and we like to get your feedback and ideas for future webinars. All right, so who do we have? We have Blair Parkhill. He's the Director of Products at Login VSI. Hi, Blair.
Howdy.
And we also have Jarian Gibson. He's Staff Solutions Architect and CTP with Nutanix.
Hello.
And his picture looks a lot different than he looks now.
I was gonna say, you can tell everyone this is like the COVID hair, like for everybody. Look at the difference, it's awesome.
And then keeping track of all of your questions and keeping us rolling along is Shane Kleinert. He is a South Florida CUGC leader and a CTP.
Sweet. Yeah, thanks so much everyone for joining. I'm excited to be here back in 2021 here for the AMA. So we had a lot of fun doing these last year and excited to get this kicked off. So definitely keep it interactive. Let's get some questions submitted. And you can ask these guys anything. They're on the chopping block for technical. It could be personal, professional advice, right? These guys have been in the industry a long time. What's their favorite Netflix show, series, whatever? I mean, it's good information here. So let's
all welcome.
Yeah, totally. So I guess to kick things off, maybe just I want to kind of go around the horn real quick, I guess. By that meaning just the two people that are on, so we don't really have a big horn to go around, I guess. But anyways, I guess try and just give. It's kind of I mean, I think both you guys have been around for a long time in the industry. Probably a lot of folks know who you are, but maybe just a quick intro to yourself. You know where you're at, but and kind of what maybe what you're focused on at your company, and then maybe for you, I guess specifically, Blair, at Login VSI. Everyone really knows Login VSI as kind of just like a load test, kind of the de facto standard when it comes to kind of like performance optimization and performance standards and performance testing. The vendors use it, you're in all the white papers, but how has kind of Login VSI evolved over the last couple of years? There's a lot of new stuff there. I can maybe kind of intro that, and then we'll kind of kick things off. So sure. I guess Jarian, take it away there.
Yeah, so my name is Jarian Gibson. I'm a Staff Solutions Architect at Nutanix, and I am in the EUC engineering side of things. Everything I do is pretty much Citrix on Nutanix. So whether it's virtual apps and desktops, virtual apps and desktop service, using Nutanix files for storing profiles and data, all those things with Citrix on Nutanix is pretty much what I focus on and what our team does. And when you go to our portal and look at things like our best practices guides, reference architectures, which we use using Login VSI for load testing, all those things are done within our team.
Awesome. And what would you say like the top 3 reasons off the top of your dome there on why Nutanix for Citrix?
Simple infrastructure. It's like Lego building blocks. So start off with 3 nodes and then add a node from there. We actually test linear scalability. So the number of users you get on 1 node, you should see on 2 nodes, 3 nodes, and 4 nodes, and so forth. And we test that with Login VSI. And then just be able to do things like multi-cloud and disaster recovery in the cloud as well. So we are a complete platform for running your Citrix virtual apps and desktops or your virtual apps and desktop service, aka Citrix cloud workloads.
That's true. Awesome. Yeah, we'll circle back to some of that. I got some questions here just kind of put together and we can talk through some of the clusters and multi-cloud capabilities. I think there'll be a lot of fun. So awesome. Yeah, and I guess Blair, let's hear a little bit about you and kind of what's going on over at Login VSI.
Cool. Yep. So Blair Parkhill, I am on the product management team here at Login VSI. You'll catch me either here in Colorado or in Costa Rica. You'll hear the birds and monkeys in the background usually. Yeah, I definitely take full advantage of the work from home philosophy. Now, the focus lately for me has been a pretty intense performance study and analysis on Azure Virtual Desktop. So kind of reaching out of the on-prem world into the cloud world when it comes to desktop delivery and application delivery. So really beating that up pretty good, which has been a lot of fun. And the product that we're most well known for is kind of takes after the name of the company, Login VSI. But I will say that product is currently in its sunset, right, where it's about to be end of life in about a year or so. And we have a product that we brought to market a few years ago called Login Enterprise, and formerly called Login PI. And we've reached outside of the benchmarking world where we're most widely used from a performance perspective. And we've really taken a strong focus at applications and really testing applications, not just the desktop performance, automating testing. And that testing can range from just testing an application, smoke test, UAT, that kind of stuff. We also do the performance testing. And then another one that relates more to monitoring, which is continuous testing. So I'm sure that will come up in some of the questions that we have earlier. We can definitely dive a little deeper into what continuous testing means. But that's the product has just taken a huge jump, and we're finding ourselves now entrenched in many of the Fortune 50 companies as testing has become a huge theme for them. So that's me, that's the company, and looking forward to the questions.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, so as you mentioned, Shane, moderator here. I work with a company called Choice Solutions out of Kansas, a senior architect, and head over the Southeast region. So anyways, yeah, so let's talk a little bit. I think let's drill into that a little bit. I think you had said kind of a lot of your over the last year or so, like kind of, or maybe year and a half, 2 years, you've been really focused towards Azure Virtual Desktop. But if you know Azure Virtual Desktop, that's really platform as a service. We're just really talking about Windows 10 on Azure, right? So in the context of where we're at from a Citrix standpoint, I mean, you're going to be testing the same when you're doing your testing, your performance testing from a desktop perspective. You're talking about apples to apples there. Obviously, when you're hitting load testing, now you're talking about the platform as a service and some of the other components outside of that. But what kind of things have you seen, I guess, from on the Windows 10 multi-session, kind of some of the customers that you're working with? What kind of process, I guess, do you guys take when you're looking at a customer that's maybe not using Windows 10 multi-session on-prem, right? They're not traditionally from kind of the multi-session world. They're using just Windows 10 native virtual desktops, and now they want to take advantage of some of that scalability and cost savings using Windows 10 multi-session. So maybe for the folks that aren't, maybe we got a couple hundred folks here on the call. Just kidding, it's not a couple hundred, it's a little under that, but anyways, but we got a good amount of folks here on the call, and maybe they don't know about Windows 10. I find that as kind of something that, and I don't know about you, Jarian and Blair, but when it comes to Windows 10 multi-session or Azure Virtual Desktop, I don't think a lot of folks kind of get that confused that you're not able, like that does apply to Citrix as well. You can use Windows 10 multi-session with the CVAD service, with Windows or CVAD standard for Azure. So yeah, if you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing there with some of the transitions, I think that would be kind of helpful.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yep. I think at this point, people are kind of looking at, can I go purely Azure Virtual Desktop, or do I want to use something like Citrix on the front end? And I think, for me, if I'm brokering sessions, I'm going to want somebody that's known for brokering. WVD is definitely kind of a fairly complete solution in that respect, but it just for me, it's just not as clean and performant as with Citrix. So we are seeing folks kind of looking at the two and using our products to kind of test and see how they behave between the two. A lot of the enterprise accounts that we're working with are looking at traditional workflows for their users, and they really want to compare not just their on-prem solutions, but they want to compare what it feels like what it's like to compare between a laptop that the user would be on and what the experience is like in the cloud, right? So it's not just comparing on-prem to off-prem, it's actually comparing like local device to, cloud. So we're seeing a lot of testing going on. We test both, and obviously you can compare the two. The other thing that we're kind of seeing when it comes to the Azure Virtual Desktop or any cloud desktop and app solution is that a lot of the monitoring that goes behind that, you just don't have the visibility that you do to the back end infrastructure that you do anymore, right? It used to be that you could look at perfmon statistics for the hypervisor itself. You don't get that anymore in Azure, right? It's just the guest. So you don't know how things are controlled on the back end. You don't know what the host resources look like. And you could actually, reboot an instance and land on Broadwell one day and reboot another day and land on Sky Lake. There's just these really weird
great
behaviors.
point. Yep.
Yeah, and so what we're seeing is the way that you monitor solutions like that now has to be done more at the top of the stack, right, from the endpoint. And what people are doing, they're using our continuous test technology that will log on to the resource, use the resource, and then log off. And it does this 24/7 by 365. It's not really a load intensive type of thing, but it reports back. How's it feel right now, right? How long did it take to log in? How long did it take for the app to come up? How long did it take to interact with the application? So instead of looking at hypervisor, processor, and memory utilization, and if those start to spike, then we start to look at other things. Instead, we're looking at it from the top down. If the user experience kind of diminishes in any way, what does that point to, and how can we drive into to kind of get a quick time to resolution on that? So it really is a big change in mentality when it comes to monitoring, where you kind of have to flip it quite a bit, from hardware to kind of the endpoint types of monitoring.
And yeah, Blair made some key points there that I kind of want to touch on. So from a Nutanix point of view, since we're hybrid and multi-cloud, we have a product called Clusters, and we're seeing customers adopt clusters for DR and bursting use cases. And then one thing there is that with clusters, it's our AHV, our software, that runs on bare metal nodes. And when you deploy that cluster in the cloud, today it's AWS, we've announced Azure, and we'll see what else the future holds. But today, when you deploy those cluster nodes, you do have visibility down to the hardware.
That's super key. Yeah.
Yep, and you also are able to control which hardware types that you get. So Blair mentioned that you could be on one type of processor today, a different type on a reboot tomorrow. With clusters, you pick the nodes. So you pick, for example, i3 metal nodes in AWS. That's your cluster hardware. That type of processor, that type of architecture is not going to change unless you deploy a different cluster with a different hardware model. So one of the nice things with clusters is we allow you to get to the cloud to use those different use cases for bursting and DR and so forth, but you have more control of the hardware types. You also have that down to top visibility to where you can see the hardware as well and get the full stack picture of what's going on.
Yeah, that's an awesome point, man. Actually, it's funny, as Blair was talking, that same thing popped in my head. I was literally going to go over to you and say, tell me about clusters, and you just nailed it. So that's awesome, because I think that to me, clusters is super unique in the industry, right? Because you literally are giving, especially for someone like a lot of people are transitioning, right? They're not, as I think Blair hit it too, right? When he had mentioned, going from traditional on-prem physical hardware and going over to Azure, AWS, it's a mindset shift, right? You can't see into everything behind the scenes, one, and then also everything is priced differently. Performance isn't linear, right? In some cases, and you might be looking at a specific disk that's attached to a VM, and you might say, oh, I only need 128 gigs of space. Well, guess what? That disk is limited to a certain amount of I/O, right? Yep. And those are things that you typically aren't thinking about. So I think, going at it from a cluster standpoint is like that mentality to me, like what I like to see, we're talking to folks as well, is you don't have to know all those things in the Azure world at that point, right? You're bringing your hardware in, right? And you then have full control. So that the same, and I think, and maybe you're seeing this too, Jarian, like governance and security compliance, all those things that you have on-prem, those then transition over to the Azure world, but you don't have to relearn everything, which I think is kind of a game, to me is a game changer, to be honest, especially when you guys have Azure and now you're talking AWS and you can just shift your workloads around kind of in your own bubble there. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yep, and that's a key thing, because you do have to understand the underlying networking, and for AWS, VPCs or Azure VNets and that kind of stuff. But once you have the actual cluster up and running inside of Azure or AWS, it's all the same familiar interfaces of Prism, AHV. It's all the exact same features and functionality. Also, too, think about when customers have been going from being private cloud to native cloud workloads. They have to refactor and change out their images, their workloads. Well, guess what? With cluster, since it's just AHV, you're just using our built-in native protection, like protection domains, or using our Leap disaster recovery orchestration as well. It's the same image across. And for those who are going from maybe vSphere on-prem and going to clusters with AHV in the cloud, we also have cross-hypervisor disaster recovery as well. So all the same features and functionality, and with clusters, it's going to help ease that transition into public cloud, because a lot of the interfaces are the same what you're used to on-prem.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And there was one question that came in here about kind of AVD and Nutanix. Will that be supported on the Nutanix hardware? I don't know if that's something that's public today, right? So or even talked about. But is there anything you can share there? I could see obviously that it makes sense to do that, but I think maybe it's a license. I don't know if there's anything you can share there or anything like that.
Well, I don't have any definite answers on that. This is just me thinking. With clusters being announced for Azure and that coming, it possibly could be some integration with AVD. This is me thinking. I don't know. I definitely could see at least Windows 10 multi-session workloads on clusters in Azure. But the rest we'll have to see as that comes out and becomes more public.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's a fair answer. Right? I think that's obviously licensing and constraints there, obviously. But because at the end of the day, even with clusters, they're still getting some of that. They're still gaining some of that value, I guess, or that compute, right? And the different consumption, right? They're still gaining some of that there. So I guess another question came in specifically around, probably Blair, for you. How can Login VSI, and I guess this goes back to kind of the traditional aspects of the product, but how can Login VSI or Login Enterprise help with Citrix sizing and assessment? It seems that's more of a general question, but if you can, I guess, cover that, and I think that'd be kind of a good transition.
Yeah. It's a great question, because things are changing so much nowadays that the sizing guidelines that we had in place 2 years ago don't apply today.
Yep.
Right. I think we used to go with Nick Rintelen was a guy that used to mention this a lot. The rule of 5 and 10, right? Yeah. Five desktops per vCPU versus 10 sessions, shared desktops per vCPU or CPU, as it were. I think when we look at the cloud, that completely changes. But if you look at how Citrix and scalability and Login VSI go together, it's a pretty perfect match, right? There are two areas that I like to focus on. One is optimizations, and then the other one is scalability. I think the only way to optimize an environment without impacting production is to do it kind of outside of production. And where are you going to find, let's say, hundreds of users, even thousands of users to, work on a new build of something like a new image? You can't get them to work on it the same way. So what they usually do is they'll take Login Enterprise and they'll throw, anywhere between 1 and 10,000 sessions at their infrastructure to see how it stands up. And the cool part about that is you can repeat that process over and over and over again until you get that image just completely locked down and beautiful from an optimization perspective. And as you go from, let's just say, one host to multiple session hosts in a cluster or multiple hosts in a cluster, you could see how that linearity is impacted. Right, Nutanix is known for having pretty linear scalability, and we've tested that with them on multiple occasions. But when you get to the cloud, that does not apply. You're going to keep bumping your head into bottlenecks each step that you take in scalability. So, to summarize the answer on that one, there's only one consistent way to make sure that your Citrix environment is locked down tight from a performance perspective and always optimized, and that's just to always test it for scalability. And the only way to get to your best optimizations is to tweak, test, tweak, test, tweak, test until you just got it as fast as you can get it. That's the best way to do it. So And we've been doing it that way for, 15 plus years with Citrix.
Sweet, yeah, no, totally agree. And I think with things changing, right? So I'm curious of your thoughts here on the importance of testing custom workloads, right? So Login VSI traditionally is very like kind of really created the conceptual pieces around like, knowledge worker, power worker,
Yep.
task worker, and then those kind of being these standard workloads that everyone use. But then you get into like, and that's great, like when you're testing, on physical hardware and scale, but then you get into your own application set, and that's just completely different ball game. So what does that look like, I guess, in the Login enterprise, and how important do you see that when you're testing, in either on-prem or moving towards like a public cloud as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, Shane. Obviously, every enterprise customer we have is not everyone. I'd say 90% of our enterprise customers have some kind of custom application. I mean, that's where all the productivity happens, right? Yeah, it's great. You get to your desktop, you open your app, but if you can't use it, if it's slow or non-usable, then you're just not getting anything done. So, healthcare as an example, Epic is huge, and Epic changes even probably. The impact of Epic changes are bigger than the impact of Windows changes, for example, right? Epic typically takes on about a 9% performance impact, meaning I need more resources, 9% more performance resources than before the update. And you get 4 of those a year. And then you get an annual update it could be about 25% impact, right? So you don't know how that really is going to play out in your production workforce unless you test that. And so we see a ton of our customers doing that, to the point where we've even produced a bunch of workload templates. So Shane, you mentioned the knowledge worker. We've always provided the entire Office suite, scripts and everything that you need to run those workloads. But we have so many Epic, Facets, SAP, Teams, Zoom, all of the stuff that's just really been kind of the center of productivity. We've added a lot of those too, so it goes quite a bit beyond the knowledge worker space. And then the last thing I'll say is with the product lately too, we're seeing our customers not just test it from a performance perspective, but you can pop in, let's say you throw in a new update to Windows, and you have 100 or 1,000 applications that you need to see, are they going to be impacted by that image change or that Windows Service Branch update? You could do scans of the install files and try and figure it out that way, or you could just run all of the applications and make sure they run. And so they've been using our virtual user technology to do that, to open the app, run through a number of interactions and report back, did this change from before the update? So you could theoretically test hundreds of thousands of applications in minutes.
Wow, that's a pretty slick feature, especially like I think as you look at the world today and how fast like really all the vendors, right, and are on fast release cadences now, and how fast, especially with SaaS applications and different cloud platforms, and now your software vendor, everyone's on fast release cadences. I feel like testing is more important now than ever.
Oh, yeah.
It's a necessity. I mean, we're getting asked a lot on our side as well about what testing platforms are there and how people are using them in their environment. So I guess I do have, and for folks out there that are listening, feel free to continue submitting questions. If you want to ask anything outside of kind of what we're chatting about here, we had some initial kind of submitted questions, which were kind of sizing based and kind of workload based, and we hit some of those. So if there's a live question you want to ask, obviously we got 2 great guys here on the call, heavily focused, as Blair mentioned, around performance and automation testing around the Azure platform and other platforms as well, and obviously Nutanix, or Jarian from Nutanix, but not just, he's been in Nutanix for a couple of years, but he's been in the EUC space for like 20 years, right? I mean, he's an OG guy. Yeah, actually, Jarian and I actually met on IRC, man. I used to stalk him actually, and then we met on IRC, and then we did our first Brightform presentation in 2012, man, believe it or not. That's some shit right there, man. 2012. It's actually, if you can find it, it's nested in YouTube somewhere. If you Google it, you'll see our first ever tag team presentation from 2012, and we're like Spitfire, man, from just tag team. Like, yeah, it was insane. So if you can find it, you get a beer. Anyways, but yeah, so I guess let's transition a little bit here. Kind kind of curious, I guess, what you guys, I guess before that, there's a very pointed question that someone had asked specifically about Nutanix Flow, kind of your micro segmentation there built into the platform. So I want to hit that because that was a pre-submitted question, and then we'll transition, I guess. Jarian, if you want to hit that.
Yeah, so just what Nutanix Flow is, or what's
it's just basically, you know, what is it, how does it work, what the value is, right? I think from a Citrix standpoint.
So think about network security and visualization. Think about putting policies in for your different workloads. So being able to control traffic between groups of VMs by policies. So today, everything with Flow is at the VM level. So think about having maybe a common image, but different use cases out there. So one group of VMs is for HR. One group of VMs is for sales, and you can apply policies to those based on those different groups, or how they log in or when they log into the VM. The one thing though is that in case of single session, it can be at the user, so whoever's logging to that VM at the time. But multi-session, it's going to be all users on the VM today. So being able to control that traffic, allow, block, tag the VMs, and also get a visualization of the traffic going in and out of those VMs as well.
Sweet. Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, I'm seeing that more and more from customers. And if you're in the, in the Azure world, right, you kind of have just that's kind of baked in, right? When you look at what the capabilities are, really each of the cloud platforms around just being software-defined networking is kind of just at its core, right? So it's definitely nice to have that as part of the platform there. So I guess let's talk a little bit about, I guess, obviously it's been crazy the last year for everybody. I'm curious for you guys, like what have you seen as kind of an uptick around obviously remote work, right? I mean, it's kind of a beat up topic right now, but I'm curious of what you're seeing on thoughts around productivity monitoring, right? I'm seeing a lot of like new pop-ups, like people have been doing traditional monitoring for a long time. I'm seeing like new things pop up, like we could monitor the productivity of your users. And like, what's your thoughts there? And I guess, some ethics thoughts there. And also like, is there value in doing that? Is there not? Are you guys, playing in that space at all? I guess, Blair, and what's your thoughts there, Jarian, on just remote work and kind of the expansion that we've seen over the last year?
Yeah, I'll let Blair go first to see what they're doing today.
Okay. Well, it's funny when you work from home. You have a lot of struggles, right? If you're a manager, you wonder what your resources are doing. And if you're an employee, you're wondering if you're putting in enough time, right? And the thing that I find is that working from home, I get more done in the first 4 hours of the day than I do in the second half of the day, right? If I'm and those 4 hours are probably equivalent to an 8-hour day in the office, easy. Right?
Yeah.
If you get 4 contiguous hours at home. So I think number one on the topic of productivity and monitoring productivity, go ahead and try, but I just don't feel like because of that nuance that I just mentioned, how do you know that your productivity reports mean anything, right? You might get on a worker for working 4 hours, but he's put out, he or she's put out, 10 hours worth of work comparatively, right? So I'd say be careful, but at the same time, I don't know about you guys. I think this in my own head sometimes, so it might be good to get validation. But I'm of somebody that if it's during the workday between the normal working hours, I don't really like my team's status notification to go to unavailable or not present, right? I like it to show active. So that's kind of like the original productivity monitor. Are they red, yellow, or green?
Yeah, totally. Got that little app that just moves the mouse like every 5 minutes. Well, that's with Login VSI. Yeah, there you go. So you got like a little automation app that just does a workflow all day on your laptop. So
I'm not going to say that's never been done, but we even have people use the automation to book airline tickets. When they open up for booking at a certain time, right? They fire up a virtual user to do it in the middle of the night or something. But anyway,
that's actually
productivity is key, right? I mean, that's what all businesses thrive on. Obviously, pushing people home was a big risk and a big unknown, which is why I get those types of tools. But I'll say be very, very careful because monitoring productivity by walking around the office is nowhere near monitoring productivity of people working from home.
Yeah, I think you totally, go ahead, Jarian. I think you hit that on the head. I got some thoughts
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, Blair nailed it, and more with kind of the Nutanix has been more of output, not input. You know, as
Yes.
long as things are being taken care of, as long as you're getting things done, that 8 to 5, butts and seats thing is during the pandemic is not going to fly. Think about the last year and a half. Everyone has shifted to remote from home working, right? Also, too, you have a lot of places where people were doing remote learning with school as well. So not only were you trying to balance, getting stuff done for your job, but also helping your kids, especially the younger kids, with remote learning. I know with myself having a first and third grader remote learning for the entire school year, it was a balancing act between myself and my wife. So for me during the day, that whole usually that 8 to probably 3 period when school's going on, it was more juggling between her meetings, my meetings, and keeping the kids on track. And just like Blair, I get more work done during certain parts of the day. So for me, it was
Yeah,
before
totally.
school started or it was after school started. And the one thing, with Nutanix and even my manager, Case Baggerman as well, was like, input, not output. Trying to monitor every keystroke, for a certain time period or the mouse moving or doing something. That's old school thinking. And some
Yes.
jobs
Yeah.
or some people who aren't getting things done, that may be needed just to make sure they're working. But for those who are continuing to show their performance and the output, I don't think it's needed.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's kind of the highlight really is it's mindset shift, it's an organizational shift and really at the manager top down as to
Yep.
being output based, because for me I'm a night guy. Like I'm up late, like I do
Yep.
crazy stuff at night. I'm not a morning person. And a lot of it, like you said, a lot of time during the day, it's just it's all over the place, and you can focus a lot more on your own time. And as long as the results are getting done, it's awesome. So yeah, because a lot of those tools, what they're looking at is like, what are your active windows? How long are they in that window for? What I see value in is actually we've been talking to a couple folks around, like Citrix micro apps and kind of the technology there, and looking at kind of productivity analytics. I think there's value there because what that look like, there's some software out there. I just started digging into this a little bit where it'll look at like how often do they cut and paste between apps, right? Like to me, there's a little bit of value there because now you can see, are they doing the same thing redundant across 5 different applications? Well, that's a problem. We need to consolidate. So I think like productivity, not so much as like this guy's effing off or whatever, but he's doing something like a way that's taken him 6 or 7 times as long. Maybe there's a way to optimize that, and I think people would appreciate that. So I think it's all about positioning too and what software is out there. But yeah, that's kind of my thought there on that. And but you kind of brought up a good point there, Blair. You'd mentioned like we were kind of joking around about creating kind of a workflow to go and book an airline ticket, but I'll tell you what, RPA, like robotic process automation, is something that's obviously hot, been hot for a long time. You guys are doing, some automated workflows, but like when the COVID situation, people are using RPA. They had RPA bots to go try to book vaccines and things like that. And I'm curious, are you guys looking at that at all for your automated testing? Do you see value in that in your platform for customers doing RPA and maybe automating some of the repetitive tasks that people do inside of those virtual desktops to help kind of streamline their day? Is that something you guys are going to be looking at or more focused towards testing and not so much like business process?
Yeah, that's more it, Shane. Absolutely, 100% testing. We're not looking at getting into RPA. That's a much more involved and much more productivity
Yeah,
focused thing. So,
totally. That's awesome.
yeah, we're completely different fields on that one, and we'll keep it that way too. Where you'll see us grow from an automation perspective is less around, process workflows and more kind of simulating real users in their workflows, right? Not
Yeah.
just that, but plugging into testing automation systems like Jenkins and reporting like ServiceNow. So our automation is really in how do you get virtual users to do the work of testing so that your people don't have to, right? That's where we're gonna focus.
Yeah, and I see that as like, do you guys see with Jarian, obviously you're involved in a lot of pilots, not as focused. Actually, you also get involved with some customer deployments of the larger ones, right? You guys get involved there. I mean, that's typically where a lot of these big, virtual desktop or virtual workspace projects fail, is just failed testing, right? And then you get these users that are just reporting, bad information, and then it ends up just causing these political issues. But versus looking at the actual underlying performance issues that there might be. So I guess how is when you talk about, helping with testing, maybe you could talk a little bit more there about kind of what that virtual tool is you're talking about, and does that tie in at all to what the users are actually doing, and I guess compare that to like what the users are doing during a real UAT versus that, and does it make sense to do both? It'd be kind of a good question.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could touch on that by just saying, like, the virtual user technology that we used to have with the classic Login VSI product was based on auto IT. I mean, a lot of us who tried to automate our IT processes used auto IT because you could interact with a user interface and get some work done. But it was not our platform. And we quickly ran into limitations. So what we did was completely rebuilt our virtual user technology. It's now based on C#, .NET, and things like that. And we have visual editors that allow you to write the code even if you're not a developer. So, and it could do way more things. So, like with the knowledge worker, for example, I can, the knowledge worker profiles we're building for Login Enterprise, they open a PowerPoint file, add a few slides, change the theme of the file, scroll up and down, present in presentation mode, flip through a few slides, exit, save, exit the slideshow, save, and then exit the application, right? I mean, that's just a pretty deep process. And if you think about enterprises and their workflows, you would do the same thing, right? You'd log in as a user, open up a patient record, for example, modify the patient record, save that record, close it, and then you could have a doctor kind of log on, update the record. You could basically do all of that stuff with the virtual user technology really pretty simply and quickly. And then the other cool part that we have is that we wrap timers around all of those operations. So each interaction, you wrap a timer around it, you'll know, the second time I ran it, it ran, 250 milliseconds slower. It ran 15 seconds slower on logins, all of that stuff. So I think really trying to emulate a real user interacting with a resource is where we are, right? That's what we do. And doing that, I think the big part about that that's really cool is that we do it the same way every time. So it's very consistent. A real user could open up a 50 meg Excel file versus a 5 meg Excel file and completely like just destroy the performance of the system, right? But you don't see that typically from a user workflow or some of the monitoring tools. You don't know that was the reason. But if you're testing consistently where this user is doing the same things every time, then if something changes, it's not the user's behavior. You can dive into where that bottleneck might be caused and resolve that pretty quickly. So hopefully that kind of hits on that question, Shane.
Yeah, no, it definitely does, and I appreciate that. And obviously there's still value in getting user feedback, because sometimes it's not so much like performance stuff, but it might be like when you're tuning the desktop and you're configuring policies or UEM for what drives and printing and lockdown and those things where maybe it's more restrictive than it needs to be. Those other things kind of play a role too in just the overall user experience. So I guess talking about user experience, right? I mean, like Office 365 is kind of just always, it's been a hot topic, right? OneDrive, hot topic. I mean, obviously there's Citrix ShareFile. We're on a Citrix webinar here, but at the end of the day, right? I mean, we got to step our game up, right? We got a lot going on in the space there from Microsoft around OneDrive. Folks are looking at both. Some folks that are invested in ShareFile, they're using that, but a lot of folks are looking at OneDrive as well, and Teams, and Citrix is doing a great job integrating into Teams. But what do you, I guess, Jarian, what's your thoughts? And a lot of customers are using FSLogics like that since the acquisition there. That's kind of the primarily, the container technology that folks are using. Obviously, Citrix has, took UPM, they do profile disk there, and you could use both. So this is a little bit about Nutanix, a little bit about kind of your experience and thoughts, and then obviously Blair, from your thoughts too around just testing around that would be kind of cool. I guess what's your thoughts there, Jarian? Obviously, you've kind of traveled around doing this webinar for UGC, so you obviously got a lot off the top of the dome there. But what's your thoughts on the profile disk specifically for Office 365, so FSLogics for Office 365 versus the user containers, and then also maybe just hit on how Nutanix files helps there?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is FSLogics was kind of I guess they were the first in the space kind of covering this challenge. They saw the market for it, and they started trying to solve that issue. Then with Microsoft acquiring them, pretty much as long as you have some kind of active subscription or entitlement to Microsoft, you're entitled to use FSLogics. So from a standpoint there, I'm seeing a lot of customers looking at FSLogics to solve those problems, especially with OneDrive. Yes, Citrix has profile management, and they've added containers for the OST cache. They've added a container for the Windows search. And recently, they've added the profile container to where you can store the whole profile or put large things in that profile container. The main difference here is that Citrix can solve a lot of the Office 365 problems or challenges with profile management, except for one, and that's OneDrive. They don't have a filter driver, so anytime you try to redirect OneDrive or point to anywhere to where it's not being tricked by a filter driver, OneDrive is going to blow up and say you can't use it, I can't be configured. Yes, with profile management, you can tag on content collaboration from on a share file and use the personal cloud connectors to have OneDrive come through the client for that, but you're bolting on a solution, and not everyone has access to that entitlement. So FSLogics has become kind of the standard there. And then you're looking at the concept of FSLogics, where you can bolt it on to a product like profile management. So you can use profile management for everything else. Use the Office container functionality of FSLogics for the OneDrive cache. For OneDrive, the OST cache for the Teams bloat and so forth. Or you can replace profile management completely with FSLogics. When you go all in with FSLogics, then you're like, okay, do I do one container or do I do two containers? There's probably a big debate on that we've had before in one of the community chats. And you see some saying all in one container for simplicity. Others are saying split out because you don't want everything in one basket. I'm kind of more of the split the containers out. Because the profile container then becomes smaller. It's easier to protect and replicate. And honestly, with the profile container holding all of your settings, that's kind of the golden goose there for the user. When it comes to the Office container and splitting that out, it's mostly cache that can be re-downloaded from the cloud pretty easily. So you can protect that differently. You cannot protect that. You can put that in different storage. So there are some options there as well. From a Nutanix standpoint, what we're seeing a lot of users do is using files to store, whether it's profile management, whether it's app layer and user layers, or user personalization layer, or FSLogics. They're using Nutanix files either on the same cluster as their workloads or a dedicated files cluster, depending on their size and their requirements. So we help with that by making your management of your user data and storage pretty simply through Nutanix files. Same pane of glass user interface as Prism. And recently we've added a feature called Smart DR for where if you're doing an active passive type scenario to where you can replicate at a share level over to a secondary site, a secondary location to use as kind of your DR location. That Smart DR with the read write on one side and the read only for the active passive is our first step into this. So stay tuned for some more exciting features coming.
And you do have a webinar in a week.
Yes.
Drill into that, right?
So nice little plug here leading to it. I do have a webinar next Thursday talking about files, which I'll talk about a lot of this, the solutions, some best practices, sizing, and so forth. So definitely join for that if you want to talk more about files with Citrix workloads.
Sweet. So actually, we do have a question that came in specifically for you, Jarian. How often would you recommend testing data recovery and restoration in terms of ensuring business continuity and minimizing the impact of completely disruptive attacks like ransomware? That's a very prevalent topic right now, obviously, with the pipeline and all these other things that are going on that happen. So what's your thoughts there?
You definitely want to keep and maintain some kind of disaster recovery data availability testing going on because you don't want to be caught by surprise, right? You always want to test the recovery plan, maybe quarterly, maybe monthly. I think quarterlies could be a good one, but you don't want to be caught. You don't want to be caught by surprise and then all of a sudden have to go into a DR or a business continuity recovery event and not be prepared for it, or for some reason something didn't replicate properly. there's old data, or is this taking you a long amount of time to recover, which is going to impact your business? So, I would say at least quarterly doing something. We have some things in Nutanix that can help with that, with our disaster recovery orchestration, using clusters in the cloud for a disaster recovery location, or using our Xi Leap disaster recovery managed service as well, to kind of help you with setting up your policies, replication, and being able to do things like a test failover, to where you can do a full test failover of your environment without impacting production. The test failovers put you in a bubble to where production can still run, but you can still go through and test your DR without taking anything down or impacting live users or impacting the business.
Sweet, yeah, that's a great answer. I think that definitely covers it there. Yes, Blair, what's your thoughts, right? So from testing, kind of your experience, I guess, with testing and feedback around FSLogics, whether that's on-prem or even in Azure, right, with Azure Files or NetApp Files. I don't know if you've done specific testing around that, or maybe got feedback from customers. Curious what you're seeing there.
Yeah, well, I mean, login performance is usually what comes to mind when you're doing things like mounting, hidden drives, things like that hold all of that information, and then the performance that backs those drives. Up until about a few weeks ago, I hadn't done any testing with FSLogics, but am now testing, including FSLogics profile containers, again, on the topic of logins, I think that was the biggest question that those who asked me to do the testing had. What does it look like when you're running FSLogics in Azure Virtual Desktop, and how does it impact the logon performance? I can tell you that when you combine kind of the updates they've made with the FSLogics profile containers, and just the technology, and then you combine that with the improvements they're making on Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session. I'm testing with 20H2, so we haven't gotten into the year 21 versions yet of Win 10 multi-session, but 20H2 has a ton of stuff in it, and I'm just very impressed. I'm seeing login times kind of being brought down as much as up to about 10 seconds. That includes FSLogics. So while it's my first FSLogics test, I've been testing Azure Virtual Desktop for a long time, and I have not seen performance like this since I started my testing. So FSLogics looks good, to the point that Jarian was making about one container versus multiple. Each container, if I understand the technology correctly, each container means that you've got another VHD that you've got to kind of mount on the back end. And each VHD that you're mounting is going to increase the amount of time it takes to log in. And so those are the things that you want to make sure that you test, right? You test it with one, test it with multiple. What's the difference? And then there's another area that, when it comes to FSLogics, the storage that you pick on the back end is typically, or at least from what I've seen in my limited experience, you kind of choose a capacity. That's your choosing point, right? And with that capacity comes a certain performance. So
correct, yeah.
We've had some of our very large enterprise customers test the performance of having different size containers on the back end. And they're seeing that, okay, if I had a 7 terabyte container, and I'm making numbers up here, I found that I could only get so far from a performance perspective before it impacted me. And then they moved to 9 terabyte, and they saw that all of the issues that they'd seen actually it went away and kind of moved on to the next bottleneck in their testing. So, there's still a lot of unknowns from a sizing perspective when it comes to this kind of stuff, and the only way to find out is to test it, right? So that's where we come in, and that's where we've been focusing a lot, and I've been doing a lot of testing lately. And I'm pleasantly surprised with the latest and greatest on FSLogics and Win 10 Enterprise multi-session.
Yeah, the biggest thing from like a testing standpoint is, as I completely agree on the testing, to kind of understand the performance and so forth, because different customers, different requirements, different impact to environments, but you also come in with a plan too as well, because you don't want these containers growing to very large amounts. For example, use policies like Outlook cache sizing to limit the size of the cache, do proper configurations around those areas, use things like OneDrive files on demand. Because the one thing too with these, you can do maintenance for these containers to clean them up, shrink them, compact them. but you also too want to do some of the base exclusions and configurations to make sure they're not growing to huge amounts and out of control.
Yeah, you had a great point, and there's actually that's one of the things with containers is they simplify the login, but with that comes great capacity, right? Or what did I say?
Your quote that
Yeah.
I use in my sessions is with great simplicity comes crappy manageability.
That's it.
That's the quote of yours that I use, and it's
That's
true.
a couple of years ago, it is, man. It's like that was the genius thing about FSLogics. It was like, let's just mount a profile and put whatever the hell you want in there, and that because storage was cheap. It was cheap on-prem, right? It made sense. But now in Azure, that shit's expensive. So you have to really look at using the various. Jim Moyle has an incredible script there. Aaron Parker has a great script for kind of pruning the VHDs at log off, and then Jim's script kind of compacts them. So I'll put a link here in the chat for folks that maybe just haven't had a chance to play with it. You can just paste it in there. Just definitely read through this FSLogics containers capacity guide.
That's a great one. He also has a pretty good one on building out your redirections XML file for base exclusions to kind of help you with trimming some of the capacity, not trimming, but keeping the capacity in the profile container lower. Don't go hot and heavy with that, but also look at using that just to get some base stuff. Another good point you did too as well, since we're throwing everything into a container, that container is always mounted from a file share somewhere. So availability of that file share is important too as well. Because think about with anything with the file-based profile management, old rolling profiles, anything else that uses files as a storage, we're copying things down, and depending on the solution, where they're copying the whole profile back, or we're syncing changes back to that file share. So if there's a hiccup during our session, we don't see that because the files are local to that machine. But with containers, since they're continuously mounted from that file share location, if there's a hiccup, we notice it. So making sure that those are highly available is key there as well. And FSLogics has Cloud Cache that's built in that can help with that. Or you can look at things like continuously available shares or any kind of depending on the storage you're using, what kind of high availability and redundancy they have built into it.
Yeah, those are great points. Hopefully for folks that are listening in, maybe just getting started with FSLogic, those are kind of some good pointers there for you. So I'll throw in a question here, just kind of switch it up a little bit because again, you guys have been in the space a long time. At the end of the day, what's one piece of advice? I guess two-pointed question here. What's one piece of advice? If you can give one piece of advice to anyone on the call here, what would it be? And the second one would be if you could give one piece of admin-specific advice from a technical perspective or consultant, what would it be? So it could be life advice for the first one. The second one is maybe more technical. Like what's a good piece of advice for someone? Like maybe they're not looking at Nutanix now. They're not looking to do testing, but they gave us an hour of their time, but they can walk away with a little nugget. Like if you throw something out there. Could be like a good food too, man. Doesn't
So from an admin perspective, same thing when you're building something, measure twice, cut once.
Nice.
Because it's easier to fix things and re-architect things before you go full user deployments if you find problems. But once you deploy and you start finding problems, it becomes a lot more noticeable. It impacts user productivity. It could impact the business, and it could impact your job. So, and it's very hard to fix or rebuy or have to fully re-architect if you don't measure twice and cut once. From a life perspective, just try to. I know the past year and a half has been tough on everybody. A lot of things have shifted. Working from home, our work-life balance has changed. But do whatever you can to maintain that work-life balance. Also, to take the time to make sure that you do things for self-care as well. That's one thing that I needed to do more than preach. But just make sure that you take time to have that self-care. Find some things outside of technology that you like to do. For me, that's food.
There's more stuff outside of Citrix?
Yes. There's more stuff outside of Citrix, outside of technology. But find those things, get that balance, do your self-care, and hydrate.
Nice.
Great point on hydration. I didn't even drink a full glass today.
Cool, good stuff. Yeah, from my perspective, from a professional perspective, it doesn't just apply to IT, but you know, I think as technologists overall, we consume just a huge amount of data on a daily basis. And so I'll step mine up to a very general practice, which is just take good notes all the time.
Yeah.
If it's Evernote, that's cool. If it's paper, I use paper still because my brain kind of remembers what I put on the paper and where it was on the page. Whereas some of the other ones is tough to remember, but it's searchable, which is nice. So, you know, for me, I couldn't live without my notes. I couldn't be as good as I am without my notes. So that would be my professional advice. My personal advice, I'll just tell you, 4 years ago, I sold my big house and bought a tiny home, like you've seen on the Learning Channel and Discovery, and that obviously cost just a fraction of what my house was. So because I did something that radical, I no longer have a house payment. I used what I made from the house sale of my house to buy another tiny home in Costa Rica. So, and I'm practicing what I'm calling contempt-retirement. You know, I think that gone are the days where we should be thinking about retiring at 65 or 70. That's BS. You should be living life now. So,
man.
you know, I think if you can think outside of the box, you can get there in no time. I'm not even 50 yet, but I feel like I live a life in retirement in a way because of some of these things that I've done. So I'd say, you know, sit down with yourself or a loved one and say, hey, you know, is there something radical we could do to you know, accelerate that and live your good life early, man?
I love that. I love that. Yeah. If I could get if I get my family to do like one of those mobile tiny homes or like that and just travel around, and as long as you have some kind of connection to the network that where you can still work, that you know, remote schooling, you know, work wherever and just travel.
Yeah, I think honestly, just we're blessed in the space that we're in, that we literally could work from anywhere. I mean, that's just really enables that lifestyle. So yeah, I totally agree, man. I think that's awesome advice, man. That's that tiny home deal there. That's we gotta. I think for 2022 AMA, we're gonna be we'll be mobile. We'll be driving around in the mobile. Everyone will have a tiny home, man. That's so awesome.
Right on.
So, sweet, man. Well, there's 2 minutes left. Actually, that would have been that was a great, I guess, segue to really end things. But now I have another question here, but then we're gonna go back into the weeds. So, but yeah, I guess let's see here. There's one more question I guess if there's any other questions you guys want to ask, we had a couple come in that I asked. If there's any other questions, we got a few minutes left. If you want to ask them with these guys, as you can see, they have a lot of great advice, not just about Citrix or Nutanix or Login VSI. They've been around the block for a long time. You know, school of the hard knocks, right? That's the type of stuff that you don't get in the school books, folks. So definitely ask away. If we don't have anything come in here, I guess I'm curious on. I see personally just a lot of questions, I guess, or I guess different terminologies for kind of hybrid. You know, like hybrid, multi-cloud. Like, what is your definition of a hybrid space or a multi-cloud space, and how does that play into kind of the world today that we're in? If you want to answer that, I guess is maybe a last question, because I feel like defining things is important, you know, because a lot, like the business is like, I want to be multi-cloud, you know, they get these like top-down approaches without understanding the impact. And obviously, Jarian, you're probably in the best space, right? You can literally live in all those spaces, you know. So
Hey Shane, before Jar answers that, I've got to hop. I got a pretty big customer here in the U.S. that will be waiting for me in about a minute. So
well, we could
I don't want to leave it hanging.
No, that's awesome, man. Yeah.
I do want to say thank you guys for this. I actually love this format and would love to do this again, because this was way more fun than just presenting some slides and doing a demo. So anytime you guys want to do this again, please let me know.
Thank you for joining, man. You provided some awesome insight for the folks here in the community, and I hope we could do this again as well. So thank you. And that's 2 o'clock, Jarian. So you could answer that if you want, or we can just kind of end it on a note there. Pass it back. Thank you, Blair.
Thank
you, Blair. Back to Stephanie. It's up to you, man. You know.
I'll answer it. So to me, hybrid cloud and multi-cloud, to me, the main thing there is not putting all of your eggs in one basket, right? Because we've all seen there can be issues in the private cloud. There can be issues in the public cloud. There can be issues in a certain public cloud vendor. So you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket, and that's where at Nutanix that we are hybrid and multi-cloud. So we can have Nutanix clusters on-prem, we can have Nutanix clusters in AWS, we can have Nutanix clusters coming soon in Azure, and we also have our Zyleap disaster recovery managed service. So being true hybrid and multi-cloud is pretty much what we're going to see going forward. I think that's going to be the theme going forward. Some customers, and it's some not just customers, but even before when I was consulting, some tried to go into all public cloud. They pulled back into being more hybrid. Using hybrid cloud makes sense in a lot of cases like disaster recovery, temporary workloads, but also depends too about your applications and data as well. Because wherever those workloads live, they have to be in close proximity to application backends, to any user data. Because if you're separating those out and there's any kind of variables in there that can impact performance of those applications or getting to that data, it's going to be a user experience issue. So for example, if someone is using all SaaS-based apps and things like Office 365, but they want like a single launch pad to access all that, maybe a public cloud desktop makes sense for that use case. If all the application data is back-end or back-end is on-prem, then that use case is going to be a private cloud, but you could use either or for a secondary disaster recovery location or a bursting location as well. So hybrid and multi-cloud is what I'm seeing a lot of places going in that trend. And always remember your proximity to your applications or your application backends and data.
Yep. No, I think that's a great answer to kind of end it on. Really, is I think that's why I think the Nutanix Citrix story is so great, because Citrix enables choice, right? You have the ability to literally be on any hypervisor, on any cloud, and on the Nutanix world, you're in the same boat, right? So I think it's a great mesh, great partnership. So with that,
any hypervisor for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, dude, thank you, man, for being a part of this. This was a lot of fun, and I guess Stephanie, if you want to pop back on and close it out, we thank everyone that's
before closing out though, I just want to say thank you again, and just like Blair said, I love this format. I think this might be my third AMA with CUGC, and so always happy to support the CUGC. If you're thinking about CUGC local meetings, get involved. They're always fun, and hopefully we'll be returning soon to in-person meetings so we can see each other again in person.
Totally. I think I saw an announcement, right? Are we able to do something? Maybe I'm wrong. I thought I saw something somewhere that maybe the next quarter we'll be able to do something, but
I wasn't going to spill that. That's why I didn't say anything about that.
Is that like somewhere I'm supposed to? Oh, maybe. Listen, I don't know. I saw that. I don't know.
Well, I think it's going to be area specific, right? So it's going to
that makes sense.
Yeah, where you are and what's happening there, because some places are still more impacted than others. But
sure, yeah, that's, and obviously folks have different comfort levels and stuff. But yeah, totally down to do this again. This was great.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. So for those of you who opted in, you probably want to know who won. I will pull the report after the webinar, and we will select at random, because I use Google random number generator. I think that's what it's called. I put all the numbers in, and then I just pull 3 random numbers. So 3 of you will get a $100 gift card, and you can choose between Amazon, Apple Store, or Google Play. So definitely be on the lookout for an email from me, or check Twitter. You can follow us at myCUGC. And thanks for being here today. Thanks, Shane. I was trying to combine names. Thanks, Shane.
Sharian.
Thank you, Sharian. That's your couple name. I love it. And
cool.
Thank you, Blair, wherever you are.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Take care.
All right. Have a great day. Bye.
Yeah, bye.